Hi guys, welcome back to the Shannon Show. Hello if you're new. So today's video is going to be a review of The Five Bloods, which just dropped on Netflix. It's Spike Lee's latest film. I hope everybody is doing as well as can be, and I really do hope that everybody is being as proactive as possible in supporting the Black Lives Matter movement. And if you're still on the lookout for some resources, I've linked some in my description. Feel free to comment down below your thoughts on my commentary. I'm always up for a chat, I'm always up for a debate, and if you liked this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you didn't, give it a dislike. No hard feelings. I'm also going to be uploading a watch along to this at some point, so if you like this video, then consider subscribing so you know when that video drops. And we're also trying to get to 1.4. Okay, honey. So I appreciate everybody who helps me out with that. And thank you to everyone who helped me reach 1.3k. We love to see it. So obviously, this is Spike Lee's latest film. I've only really just got into starting watching films. And I confess, I haven't watched that many Spike Lee films, I confess. I've only watched one before this. Don't judge me, guys. I know I have to go back and watch some others. So I'd welcome any recommendations in the comment sections of any Spike Lee films to watch. But the last one that I watched was the latest one, was the BlacKkKlansman. And I thought it was a solid film. But I'm not going to lie, I feel like I was just a little bit catfished. I thought it was going to be something else, Shadi. Was it just me who felt a little bit catfished? But overall, it was a decent film, I'd say. So going into this film, it sounded pretty interesting. A group of African-American vets from the Vietnam War go back to Vietnam to find their friend's body and also some hidden treasure. So I was thinking, this is, interesting. It sounds like an adventure, but also with Spike Lee, I know he usually has a lot of social commentary in his film as well. So it's kind of interesting how those two aspects would intertwine, the kind of social commentary but also the action adventure plot. And interestingly enough, some of the stuff is ironically still relevant today. They do mention the Black Lives Matter movement in there, but they do also have clips from the 70s, the 80s, the 60s that are still applicable to today's America and the racial tensions and the racial inequality that is still going on in America. And considering what is going on in the world right now, I feel like it is pretty relevant right now in terms of the social issues that it addressed, which I'll get into. So in terms of the narrative, them going back to Vietnam and, finding their friend and finding this treasure. I think in the beginning, it starts off a bit slow. I definitely think they could have got to the action a bit more. Obviously, they had to introduce everybody, get everybody's beginning of their backstories, but I feel like they could have done that in the jungle. But once the action starts, it is full on action, guys. There's guns, there's guts, there's blood. It is very graphic and shocking. And they also do intertwine that with archive footage from the war, which is just as graphic. And I feel like, I feel like it's weird because in action films, when people's heads are getting blown off, when there's explosions and people's body parts are flying about, I don't find it jarring or triggering. But when they put in the actual real footage of the atrocities that went on in the Vietnam War, I had to look away. I couldn't watch it. And I don't know if it was necessary, to be honest, because some of the footage that they put in there is triggering. I didn't read any trigger warnings. I'm not sure if there was, but I feel like there should be trigger warnings. But at the same time, I don't know, I've only watched one Spike Lee films, but I'm assuming they're all similar, as in they usually do have graphic footage of atrocities that have went on in the world. So in BlacKkKlansman, in the last one, we don't really get a warning, but we saw Heather, the woman who got ran over at a protest and died. We saw footage of that and there wasn't really much warning. I don't know, I guess that's his style and there's always different views on that. And also in wider life, in terms of the Black Lives Matter movement and, things being retweeted. For instance, the George Floyd video, that's the video that's been circulating that has, set off all of these protests. I personally didn't watch the video, and every time I saw it on my screen time, I would just click past it because I just feel like I don't need to see the footage to know what happened. I feel like it would be better just to maybe like a screenshot and then just say what happened. I feel like I don't need to watch a video of someone being killed to know that they were killed and to know that it was wrong that they were killed. But then some people have the argument of it's real, you should show this stuff so people know what's going on, because people want to turn a blind eye to it, so we need to show them the reality. And I also do get that argument, because I feel like sometimes people do need to see what's going on. But when you already saw what's going on, do I want to see another black person die as a black person? So I don't know, because I just feel like if that was my brother, my father, my cousin, I wouldn't want the whole world to see them in their last moments. But I guess it's different. But I personally don't think it's necessary. But I'd be interested to hear from you guys. Do you think showing graphic images of atrocities that go around in the world is necessary to educate and spread awareness, or do you feel like it's not necessarily needed? I'd be interested to hear from you guys. But regardless of the fact, I don't think that there should have been dead children in here. They have graphic images of dead children, and yeah, that was just really triggering. But for those of you who watched it, what did you think of the graphic images of the atrocities that went on? Do you feel like it is necessary? Like, it is intended to shock, it's intended to, evoke emotional reaction? Because I did get an emotional reaction from it. Or do you feel like it wasn't necessary to trigger your audience like that? Let me know what you think. But yeah, it's kind of strange how I have no problem with the fiction stuff, but like I had like an emotional reaction to the real life pictures, which was interesting. But there was certain parts in the film with the violence where I had to look away, where I couldn't watch certain things go down, and if you watched it, you know what parts I'm talking about. But yeah, there was some certain parts where I had to look away. I couldn't look at it, man. So I guess at the same time, despite my criticisms, it did its job. It did its job. There is parts where you want to look away. You have such an emotional reaction, which I guess you could argue is a good thing and probably was the objective of Spike Lee. So yeah, I guess I can commend him on that. And I feel like the action is really satisfying. Pretty much you could slap a action genre on it, and it wasn't even just like flashbacks of them in the war. We saw the old daddy gang getting at it as well, which is quite interesting, because normally with action films we usually get a young cast, but we literally had like 50-60-year-olds lighting shit up, man. It was awesome. I was living for it. So yeah, overall I feel like the narrative was pretty solid. Some of the timing could have been a bit concise down, but overall, I feel like it was a solid narrative, a solid script. I think my only pet peeve of the script or the pacing would be sometimes we saw these really long monologues, and I feel like they definitely could have been cut down. Sometimes I'm just like, okay, this speech is going on and on and on and on. I mean, we get your initial point. But yeah, other than that, I didn't really have any faults with the script. So yeah, let's talk about the commentary. Because, I like a little bit of commentary on my channel. If you've been here, And considering what's going on, let's talk about it. Let's talk. One of the key parts in terms of the social commentary that is going on in this film, and I think it's an issue that has been addressed time and time and again, is PTSD from war. And I think universally, it's agreed that vets don't really get enough emotional support, psychological support once they come back from the war, and a lot of them are kind of left to their own devices in terms of dealing with the trauma from obviously in terms of the group of vets, there is one who seems to be more affected than the other, and they all basically confide and say, look, even though we're not showing the symptoms as strong as you are, we are all going through the same thing as you. And what I think is quite interesting is that they all acknowledged that they were suffering from, mental trauma, but nobody really talked about getting help or how they have been dealing or managing. It's kind of just like, yes, we know that you're going through this, but you just got to push through. And I think that is a conversation that comes up time and time and again, especially in the Black community in terms of mental health. I feel like, yes, there's stigma attached to it. And I think there is more acknowledgement of mental health in community. But I think there is still this kind of sentiment of, yes, we're going through it, but we just got to carry on. And I think maybe a lot of it has to do with access to therapists and stuff like that. Not everybody has access to a therapist, so some will say, well, you got to just carry on. Obviously in the UK we have free healthcare, including mental health care, but the waiting line to see a counsellor is ridiculous. So a lot of the time you do have to just carry on. But I'm not sure whether it's now that is the main reason, or whether it's still because there's stigma. It's kind of just like, yeah, we're going through, but you just got to carry on, the kind of strong black person mentality. But I think it's nice that they addressed it, and I think it's nice that even though per se they didn't get help, they were all talking about it openly. They were all talking about their emotions openly. We saw a lot of emotional moments between fathers and sons, which I thought is always great to have in films, just to keep the normalcy of that in films going. So yeah, I feel like they addressed the mental health issues well, but I'd be interested to hear you guys' thoughts, particularly black viewers, your thoughts on the way that mental health is approached in the black community, and perhaps what are the obstacles in place in terms of us not seeking treatment. Is it access, or is it because we simply just feel like we have to just carry on? So the next kind of social commentary that we see in the film, kind of represented through one character, is xenophobia within African Americans, and African Americans who vote for right-wing people like Trump and support his message of, build the wall, limit the amount of immigrants coming to the country. And I feel like that is an issue that is often not really spoken about within the black community as a whole, because I don't think it is just black Americans. I think the issue of xenophobia is rife within the black community, even the African community, which I'm a part of. There always seems to be like these whispers of, we don't like that group of people, we don't like that group of people. And because we are victims of racism, nobody kind of seems to talk about it, because it's kind of like, oh, well, we're victims of racism. So nobody really wants to acknowledge the xenophobia that goes on in the black community. And I've tried to understand it, because I feel like when you're an oppressed group, often your oppressor will try and pit oppressed groups against each other. So then one oppressed community ends up hating another oppressed community. But then I also think there is still responsibility in the black community, and I struggle as somebody who comes from an immigrant background to tap into that sentiment. So I don't know if anybody of you guys have an idea. What is it? Do you think it's because of, is this a symptom or byproduct of divide and conquer, or is there something that is not being said or spoken about in the black community? Considering what we have been through, why would we want to perpetuate that? I'm gonna know from you guys, because the only thing I can think of is divide and conquer, or perhaps tensions amongst other groups that have blown into xenophobia. What do you guys think it is? But I definitely think it's an issue within the black community that definitely needs to be addressed and stamped out as well. In terms of black right-wing voters, yeah, I still don't get it. I have an idea of why. Perhaps, I'm leaning towards the, coonization, I'll never understand the logic of voting for somebody who has historically been against you as a human, continually voted against the betterment of your existence. I personally don't get it. I think sometimes in terms of, if you are rich and you want to protect your wealth, maybe right-wing parties might be attractive to you. But I feel like if you are a poor black person voting for a right-wing group, I just I don't get it, man. But I'd be interested to hear from you guys. Anybody got some theories? If you are a right-wing black voter, come out. Let's speak. I'm not here to judge, but, let's speak, But yeah, I just find it strange. But if anyone has any reasons, I'm all ears. Another interesting point that the film points out, which I thought was quite interesting, is that somebody says, this is when Black history wasn't popular. And that is quite interesting. And if we were to apply it to today, it makes it even more interesting, because obviously when this film was made, I guess this is just talking about generally about, the kind of campaigning to make Black history more important than it was, and less of a throwaway history month. But I think that's quite interesting if we apply it to Black Lives Matter, because initially, a couple years ago, Black Lives Matter, when people would say it, there was a lot of resistance. There was a lot of hashtag Black Lives Matter, no, all lives matter. And even still now we get, the all lives matter gang screaming, but there's definitely less of it. And as well as there is less neutral people who would want to protect their bag by staying neutral on racial issues are now speaking out. Are now making statements. People who, I used to have arguments in my sociology lesson when I'd be arguing about the significance of racial inequality, are posting black squares. Corporations who've never posted a black person on their page for a year are posting that they are in support of the community. So it's definitely, Black Lives Matter has definitely become popular, has definitely become trendy. So I thought that was quite interesting, but even within that, there is still this a split argument of people are finally waking up, people are finally realizing what we've been saying is true. But then there's also some people that are saying, well, they're just jumping on a trend because everybody's doing it. White influencers are doing it now. I mean, that was unheard of. Maybe you'd get one or two back in the day, but now it seems like they're all doing it. And even, black people who never talk about race, to keep their bag, are now speaking about it. So I'm kind of conflicted, because I feel like even though I think a lot of people are doing it to be trendy, are doing it for, I guess you could say, clout, I think even, as people, people trash influencers and stuff like that, but they really do influence in terms of music stars. They really do influence, because some people can think, well, maybe if they're saying it's an okay organization, maybe it is okay, and they start doing more research. So I can appreciate that aspect of it, but at the same time, it's just kind of like, where were you? Because the silence was deafening before, and it's frustrating. Some people might feel like this is validation. Oh my God, like finally my voices are being heard. But for me, I kind of find it more irritating. But at the same time, real or fake support, there is strength in numbers, and numbers do matter in movements. But yeah, I kind of get both sides. But where do you kind of fall on the spectrum of Black Lives Matter becoming a trend now? Do you have a problem with people who are kind of being a bit fake about it? Or do you just kind of feel like we need numbers kind of thing? I'd be interested to hear from you guys. Continuing on to that, I guess it kind of has commentary on protests, because obviously with them being black vets, it also does focus on the racial elements. Lots of people were protesting. Muhammad Ali came out and basically said, why should I put my life on the line, fight for a country that treats me like shit, for an enemy that isn't my enemy? And I feel like there is a significant amount of people that kind of feel like the Vietnam War was absolutely pointless. The reasons that they gave to justify it definitely didn't match up to the human sacrifice and the death. From what I've read up on it, I don't think it was a necessary war. And before I kind of get into the racial elements of soldiers, I just wanted to ask a question, because Storm and Norman, Chadwick Boseman's character, brought it up, the kind of commentary of, he said that war is about money. And again, that is another debate. Do you think that war has solely been about money? I think in kind of like the 21st century, 20th century, I think, not even just the 21st century, I always forget that like 2000s was 20 years ago. I'd say yes. I feel like Iraqi, Afghanistan war, I feel like the reasons that they gave 9/11, I don't think it was strong enough. And I think, you know, the fact that these countries are rich in oil, and that is a resource that the US view as valuable, it's suspicious to me. I mean, the amount of human sacrifice simply did not add up. I feel like those wars were unnecessary and the reasons just were very suspect. I'm not sure what the economy had to gain from the Vietnam War. I'm not entirely clued up, but clue me up in the comments if you think I'm missing some things. But in regards to the grander themes of things in the 21st century, I think money has definitely been a big motive. Obviously, the Vietnam War, it was conscription based. I think if you were conscripted into the army and you refused, like, criminal action could be taken against you, and there was lots of protests against it. Nowadays, it's voluntary conscription. So the Afghanistan war, that was voluntary conscription. But at the same time, they do target specific groups. They target poor people. They target ethnic minorities. And as there was commentary on, and you know, commentary within the film, black people made up 11% of the population, but yet 32% of them were conscripted into the army. So that is a disproportionate rate of black people being conscripted into the army. And there was also a point made that it was mostly black people on the front lines. So it's almost like black people were being used as bodies. They were being seen as less worthy than their white counterparts. And then after being used, Vietnam War, they came back to racism. They still didn't have equal rights. They still didn't have equal freedoms. There was still racial inequality. So it's kind of just like a double slap in the face. And I think that kind of points to the question of patriotism. And that is a question that is going around all around in the West, even in the UK. There's this whole argument with Churchill and how, you know, everybody, including black people and Asian people who were disproportionately affected by his policies and his views, should respect him, and should feel patriotic pride in his name. And then I guess the same with America. There's always been an argument with the Black Lives Matter movement with Colin Kaepernick and the flag and the kneeling. Does America deserve patriotism from black people? Does America deserve patriotism from black people? And should Americans automatically be patriotic? That is a question. In the UK, patriotism isn't that much of a thing. Like in America, when you go to America, if you haven't been to America, there's American flags everywhere. In the UK, it's not like that. You might see a flag here and there. But even now, the England flag, you only really see it in the World Cup. You don't really see it everywhere because it's become to be associated with nationalism. I'm not sure if that's just London, because London is a multicultural city, but I've been outside of London, around the UK, and you don't really see people hanging out flags outside their houses like you do in America. People aren't ashamed to say that they're British though, even people who come from immigrant background. But I still feel like the patriotism isn't as strong in the UK as it is in the US, which I think is quite interesting. I'm interested to hear from UK viewers. Do you think the UK is a patriotic country? And yeah, I'd be interested to hear from my American viewers about like patriotism and whether America has the right to demand patriotism from the people it has oppressed for hundreds of years, and whether as an American citizen you should be patriotic, period. I want to hear from you guys. And then following on from that, they also address protests in a way, in terms of having a peaceful reaction or an angry reaction. And I think, again, that still kind of links in with what is going on right now. There's been various debates in terms of protesting, sticking it to the man. Should it be strictly, I think a lot of people are arguing it should be strictly protesting. They're not really here for the rioting, property destruction, burning things down, looting, etc. What other people are kind of saying, that all doesn't matter, or it's justified, and in an uprising anything kind of goes. My stance on it is, I feel like, yeah, anything goes. I feel like as long as people aren't dying and being killed, I feel like in an uprising, yeah, anything goes. I feel like, peaceful protesting, yes, there's strength in numbers there, but I also feel like in terms of pressure to affect change, you've got to affect them in some way to force them to make change. So yes, protesting, being a nuisance is all well and good, but I feel like if you put pressure on them in other ways, they'll probably be more perceptive to hearing for what you have to say. So I feel like the burning down of police stations, which were empty, there was no casualties there, I think definitely put pressure on, more to be done with the police force in terms of charges and stuff like that. In terms of looting, that puts pressures on the businesses to make changes. And it puts pressure on as well the government as well, because the government is relying on all of these businesses to make money as well through taxes and stuff like that. So if you start affecting the businesses, especially when we're living in a capitalist system, that is going to force people to pay attention to you. So therefore, I don't really have a problem with it in the grand scheme of things. There's lots of people saying, well, people are just looting because they want stuff. They're not even here for the cause. I still don't really care about that, to be honest. I don't care about a TV being taken from a shop, because I feel like it all works towards the same thing, putting pressure on companies, capital, and the government and the people who make the laws and stuff, and the gatekeepers. But that's just my opinion, but I'd be interested to hear yours. Do you feel like it should strictly be peaceful protesting, or do you feel like, in an uprising, anything kind of goes? And then I guess the next thing is, it's very subtle, but again, a commentary is the N-word. And I feel like they make this commentary of, should black people be saying the N-word? I think the universal argument is that, white people shouldn't say it. I also think non-black people shouldn't say it, period, as well. But I think mainly the focus is white people saying it, but I also think non-black people shouldn't be saying it either. And I think there's two debates. There's one debate amongst the black community is, we shouldn't say the word because it's a degrading word, the history behind it, the hurtful history behind it. Why would we want to reclaim such a word? And then there's the other half that says, well, we should reclaim it, make it into something else. And yeah, also just to clarify, also in songs as well, like if you're not black, I don't think you should be saying the word, period. Yeah, just to clarify that, because I feel like, again, there's a sort of leeway of, if they're saying it in a song, maybe it's different. Nah, don't say it. But in terms of where I stand, I feel like it should be up to the black person to decide. If they don't want to say it, fine, but if they want to reclaim it, fine. I feel like I don't have a problem with it, but if a fellow black person can tell me, I don't want you to say that word around me, then I would respect that. I can see it from both sides. But I'd be interested to hear from my black viewers where you stand on the N-word usage. Where do you stand, guys? And then I guess the last kind of commentary, big-ish commentary, is money. Obviously, they're going there to find this pot of gold, but they also kind of intertwine this social commentary of money and the value of money in the black community, and on two sides in terms of money being used to liberate black people. If we all come together and pool our money together, we could perhaps, advance ourselves as a people. And in terms of the advancement of black people, I think we're definitely going to need money for that, because, what's going on in the world is creating change, but I don't think a capitalist system in the West is going to be dismantled anytime soon. I think there's going to be change, positive change, but I don't think the capitalist system is going to be dismantled. I think people are definitely moving towards more of a socialist state, but I think even if we were to go back to a socialist state, even in the UK, where we are right now is the Conservative government in control. Even if we were going to go back to that, it would still be, I think, centre social. I don't think it would ever be far left, communism, Marxism. I don't think we will ever live in a West in my lifetime where it's like communism and stuff like that. So therefore, because money makes the world go round, money is the root of all evil, but it also makes the world go round. So if we want to advance as a people, or even just as a black individual, you're going to need some capital. So I think that is important commentary there. But it also kind of touches on the distribution of wealth within the black community and how, I guess maybe throwing some shade to rich black people, rich multimillionaires that don't give back to the community, because there's kind of different arguments of what they should do with the money. Should they keep it for themselves? Should they give it to the community and stuff like that, back and forth? And again, that is another argument that could be applicable to real life. A lot of black multimillionaires have been called out. I guess Virgils, keeping it to Virgils. He was like blasted for being a millionaire, but supposedly only donating $50 to the Black Lives to a bailout fund. He said that he donated a bit more. But, time and time again, people have been saying, why should we be praising these black billionaires and multimillionaires for having so much money when they barely give back to the community? And I think a key one could be Diddy. He's always talking about black excellence and stuff like that. He's always saying, white executives need to give black people their props and stuff and stop gatekeeping. But then we have one of his artists, Mason, come out and say, well, you're talking about black excellence, black power, black wealth, but you've actually cut me a really bad record deal and been taking all of this money from me. And won't give me my masters to allow me to make more money. So then there's a lot of hypocrisy going on in the community. And some people might argue, well, they've worked hard for their wealth, so we don't have the right to tell them what they should do with their money. But I feel like if you just have a ridiculous amount of money, I don't know how you could feel right, especially when you have come from poverty, how you could feel right not giving back to your community, and why you would not want to, why you'd want to hoard all of that wealth. But I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on black millionaires. Do you feel like black millionaires have the right to give back to the community, or do you feel like because they've worked hard for their money, they should be able to do whatever they want from it? And generally, money in the black community, do we need wealth to advance us as a people in this world, or do you feel like perhaps maybe protesting and fighting for change could do that instead? I'd be interested to hear from you guys. And then I guess the rest of it kind of just interlinks Black Lives Matter, and of course we see some archive footage from past civil rights leaders. We see Angela Davis, we see Martin Luther King, and they're all basically saying things that are still relevant today, which is just really sadly ironic. And then they also kind of interweave subtle bits, so they do address the high rates of black women dying in childbirth or after childbirth. So moving on to the acting, I'd say everybody did a great job with the acting. A fantastic ensemble cast. When I came into this, I only really knew two of the actors there. Chadwick Boseman, of course, Black Panther, shameless, I know. He wasn't in it as much as I thought he was going to be. He's not as in it as much as you probably think he's going to be in it. But he did, a decent job with the role that he was given. And also Jonathan Majors, who I watched in the last Black Man in in San Francisco. He was great in that, and he was also pretty decent in this as well. And then obviously the vets, or as I like to call them, the old daddy gang, absolutely love them. They built this friendship and this brotherhood that just felt so organic. It kind of felt like they were my uncles, and you get so emotionally invested in them, even when you don't agree with all of them or they annoy you. You feel emotionally attached to them, and they all have like different personalities. There's, you know, the strong-headed one, there's the one that's always trying to keep the peace, there's the one that's cracking jokes. So they all have their own distinct personalities like you'd find in any regular group. But I think the standout performance is, you know, the character who plays Paul, Delroy Lindo. Absolute standout. Like, he was an annoying character. I found him annoying, but I still liked his character at the same time. And he was definitely the standout performance. I think he probably did get the most screen time, to be honest. He is just going through it. Like, he's been, I feel like he's visibly the most affected by his time in Vietnam. In the beginning, you kind of know he might be a problematic character. But the way that he just develops and just his distress and the way that he presents his distress and his trauma just layers and layers and layers until what we get at the end. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Probably one of the best performances I've seen this year. So I think all around the Old Daddy Gang definitely did this film justice. There was some other characters that kind of came in the second half of the film. I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't really feeling them, to be honest. It kind of just felt like an odd inclusion. It was like this French girl and her friends, and they ran this charity. And I think that their role was to show how white people can use their privilege. And I think the last film that I watched, Black Klansman, does the same thing. And I think his reason for doing that is to show that it shouldn't just be black people fighting this fight. It should be white people as well. It should be everybody fighting this fight. So that's why I think that they were there. But honestly, I could have done without them, to be honest. I don't think if they weren't a part of this story, then the film would have been any different. What is also interesting was the dynamics between the black vets and the Vietnamese people. Obviously this is all set in Vietnam, if I haven't said. Overall, great performances across the board. It was a really emotional film, and I feel like they all harnessed that well. The characters do a good job of taking you through this roller coaster of emotions. I do think it was a bit weird how they didn't hire younger actors with Chadwick Boseman, who was younger. A bit strange. And they were all like clean shaven and everything, so I'm guessing that was made to make them look younger. I'm not really sure why they did it. Maybe as in like because they're going back to Vietnam, they're putting themselves back into those memories. But I think I would have preferred to have a younger cast. I feel like it was a bit strange, them, the Old Daddy Gang. But I'm not sure if there were flashbacks or memories. Ooh, interesting. In terms of the other aspects of the film, I feel like all of the other aspects of the film were pretty great. The cinematography was great. I really liked how they switched to kind of digital film, but then also with film in it as well. I think they actually put some Super 8 footage in that as well to kind of cut and paste between the present day and when they were in Vietnam. But yeah, cinematography was beautiful. The score was great. The soundtrack, it was pretty much, I think it was Marvin Gaye throughout all of it, which I didn't mind. You know, I'm a big fan of Marvin Gaye's music, but what I will say is that I wasn't a fan of the acoustic version of What's Going On. Wasn't a fan of that, to be honest. It felt a bit empty without the instrumental. But overall, decent soundtrack. In conclusion, I'd say this is a pretty solid film. Like I said, it does take a while to get into it, so that's like my only pet peeve. In terms of who I would recommend it for, I feel like if you like Spike Lee's films, you're probably going to really enjoy this film. I'm not sure if I've said it yet, but I do think it's better than Black Klansman, a lot better, I think. And definitely probably could have potential to be a Spike Lee classic, I think, as well. I do think perhaps maybe a more mature audience will appreciate this film more, because I'm not going to lie, I did get a little bit restless at times, particularly in the beginning when they were building up to the action. So I think maybe some younger audiences, teenage audiences, might lose interest. It is very triggering. So just bear in mind that if you don't really like triggering stuff, this might not be the film for you, but it is very triggering. Lots of graphic images in. But overall, it's a solid production. I think if you really want to know more about the African American experience, the African American vet experience, I'd recommend this for you. I feel like it relays that very well. So I think taking everything into account, I'm going to give this film a very strong 3 out of 5. The reason why I'm just is because I think the first half of the film kind of let down, and there were some bits where I feel like there could have been refinement, that could have taken some things out. There were some plots that were initially quite juicy, but by the end of it felt a little bit rushed, like they kind of addressed the situation at the beginning and then concluded it at the end. I thought there was going to be a little bit of a storyline there concerning one of the characters, with some unfinished business in Vietnam, which I'm sure you know who I'm talking about if you've watched it. So yeah, but I'd still recommend checking this film out if, like I said, if you're a fan of Spike Lee's stuff, if you don't mind potentially triggering content. And yeah, but even for younger audiences, I'd say, just check it out and see if it's for you or not. I guess I can't speak for every single young person, but I think it will probably go down better with mature audiences, in my opinion. So yeah, if you haven't watched it yet, do let me know, if this is something that you were or are thinking about checking out. And if you have watched it, do let me know what your thoughts on it were. Let me know what your thoughts were on my thoughts. Let me know what you'd rate it out of 5. Subscribe if you haven't yet, and if you have, don't forget to press that notification bell so you'll know when the next review is dropping. Till next time, guys.